Welcome GRD 121, Computer Graphics, to a very quick lesson on paths. Now in Gravit or in Illustrator, we're working with paths. They have line segments and they have anchor points, they have beginning points, end points. Sometimes they don't have beginning points and end points because you can't see them. It's basically three kinds of paths. There's open paths, there's closed paths, and there's compound paths. That's really it. Open, closed, compound. The easiest ones are the ones that we've been working with, which have been like polygon shapes. So if we make a rectangle, that's a closed path. It's like a fence. There's no opening in it. You can't get in it. It's closed, and we typically fill them and can put strokes on them. So I could go to this shape and I could fill it with red, and then I can go over and select it again, add a border on it, which in Illustrator there's strokes. I could make a thick border. I could make this border go on the center of the path. If you open up border settings, I can make them go on the center of the path or on the outside of the path. Illustrator by default always puts strokes on the center of the path, just to note. So that's a closed path. If I make another path here and I make an ellipse, it's using the same settings with the stroke, that's another closed path. If I make a star, it's a closed path. And what you could do with these closed paths is actually combine them to other shapes, which we're doing in those other exercises. So I could highlight these two things, and I could do a unite, or union as they call it, and put them together and they become one shape. And I'll just undo that right now. And another thing you can do is make a compound path. That means if I take another oval or an ellipse and I put it right on top of here. And again, don't get distracted by all the colors and the strokes. Remember, when you go to view and you go to outline view, that's really what we're dealing with here. Here's a closed path, here's a closed path, and here's a closed path. They're saying these down here. Now, keep in mind also, now this is a Gravit thing, that when you draw a rectangle and you draw an ellipse, they're not really paths yet because we don't really see the anchor points yet. That's why we have to use the squiggle thing and break them down to paths. But for what we're doing right now, it's still fine. We can break them down to paths, or we can leave them as an ellipse and a rectangle. They're still closed paths is basically what they are. If I go back here to view and turn off outline view, I can make this top path, and let me make it a different color just so it looks different. I'll make it yellow. I can make this top path chop out from that bottom one. That's what compound paths are. They're basically two paths that act like one. If I use a subtract operation, which punches out the first, then you could see through this. You could see through it. It makes a hole through it. I'll make this rectangle a different color here, different color fill, so you could see it a little different. I'll make it orange. Now you could see through this. And when I select this shape, because it's a compound shape, I could turn down the stroke for the whole shape. It works on the whole shape. It's like a letter O. I made my own letter O by doing that. And they share the same properties. They share the same fill. They share the same stroke. So they work together. It's not quite like grouping. It's a little different than grouping. The fact that you have kind of an empty area in the center. The nice thing with this, you can also, put this on top of here. We did it with a mug. Picture this being a mug. And if you put a compound shape and a closed path together, you can still unite that by using the union operation. And there they become one shape there. And if I want to make these shapes become not joined anymore, that's why they have this extra little step here called compound shape. It's not permanent yet. Unless you use the squiggle, convert to path, that'll make it permanent. But until then, it's all kind of temporary. So if you wanted to undo it, you could either undo it, or you could go to modify ungroup selection. And that'll kind of break them apart from what they were initially. And now they all came apart. So they all came apart, even this compound path that was here. So if I wanted to make that a compound path again, I'd have to highlight that and do a subtract again. So closed path, compound path, what's left? Open path, a line. There's a line. That's an open path. It's like a fence with an opening. It can have a small opening. This is just one straight line. So line segments are open paths. That's really it. Now I can increase the border size on this thing, and notice it's on the center right now. I can also use the pen tool, and I could go around and do something like this and make an almost circle and double click there. Now that's also an open path. That's an open path. And keep in mind that even though this is a path and it's open, they still let you fill it, which I don't like you doing because I think it's confusing, because it's kind of like if you put water in there, it would spill out. So I don't like the idea that they actually let you fill an open path. I think you should avoid doing that if possible. because there's nothing really containing it. But they will let you do that, but I'll tell you to avoid doing that. And you also have to avoid using operations like trying to unite this with something else. Like just for example, and I'm not sure how Gravit will handle this, but I'm just going to make a copy here. If I tried to join this and that, and I highlighted them together, and I tried to do a union, well, it worked, but it closed the path for us. So it kind of fudged it a little bit to do that. So try not to do that. Always use these compound operations with closed paths. Remember, closed path, open path. Leave open paths alone. And if not, close them. I think you could even click on this thing, and they even have like a little thing, you could close it. So it'll actually close it for you. So those are the only kind of paths we're dealing with. Closed, compound, open. This thing was open, but then I closed it and I'll open it up. So now it's an open path. That's it. Just be aware of that those are the things that we work with in Illustrator. Those are the things that we work with in Gravit. If I go into outline view, they're all just paths. They're all just connected with anchor points. If we use our sub-select tool, we can see anchor points on these things here. We're actually not seeing them here because they're still ellipses. But if you make a shape like this, there's my anchor points. And we'll talk about anchor points next, so don't worry about them too much. But again, closed, compound, open. 3 types of paths that we work with in vector art.